Alright guys, chapter 15, First Love. During the next 5 or 6 days I hardly saw Zenaida at all. She declared herself unwell, which however did not prevent the habitués of the lodge from dancing attendance upon her, as they put it, all except Maidanov, who instantly became bored and gloomy whenever there was no excuse for rapture. Bylovzarov sulked in a corner, all buttoned up and red-faced. Over the delicate features of Count Malevsky there often hovered a malignant little smile. He really had fallen out of favor with Zenaida, and was now waiting upon the old princess with exceptional assiduity. He accompanied her in a hired carriage when she paid a visit to the governor-general. Actually, this expedition turned out to be a failure and involved a disagreeable experience for Malevsky. An old scandal involving some paper officers was brought up against him, and he had to explain it away by pleading his inexperience at the time. Lucian used to come once or twice a day, but did not stay long. I was a little frightened of him after our last open conversation, yet at the same time I felt genuinely attracted to him. One day he went for a walk with me in the Neskuchny, was very amiable and agreeable, told me about the names and properties of various plants and flowers, when suddenly, it was really neither here nor there, he struck himself on the forehead and cried. And I, like a fool, thought that she was a flirt. Evidently to sacrifice oneself is the height of bliss for some people. What are you trying to say? I asked. To you I am not trying to say anything, Lucian brusquely replied. Zenaida avoided me. My presence, I cannot help noticing it, was disagreeable to her. Involuntarily she turned away from me. Involuntarily. It was that which was so bitter, so crushing, but there was nothing I could do. I did my best to keep out of her sight, and would try to watch her from a distance, which was not always possible. As before, something was happening to her which I could not fathom. Her face had altered. She became an entirely different being. The change which had taken place in her struck me with peculiar force one warm, still evening, as I was sitting on a low seat under a spreading elder bush. I loved this corner of the garden. From it I could see the window of Zenaida's room. I sat there in the dark mass of leaves over my head. A small bird was rummaging about busily. A gray cat, its back stretched out, was creeping cautiously into the garden. The air, still clear but bright no longer, was heavy with the droning of the early beetles. I sat there and looked at her window and waited in case it opened, and it did open, and Zenaida stood before me. She was wearing a white dress, and she was pale herself. Her face, her shoulders, her arms were pale, almost white. She stood for a long time motionless, gazing straight before her with unmoving eyes from under heavily knitted brows. Such a look I had never known upon her face. Then she clasped her hands tight, very tight, raised them to her lips, her forehead, then suddenly wrenched her fingers apart and thrust back her hair from her temples, tossed it, then with an air of resolution nodded and shut the window with a slam. 3 days later she met me in the garden. I was on the point of moving away when she stopped me herself. "Give me your hand," she said in the old caressing manner. "We haven't had a gossip for a long time." I looked up at her. Her eyes shone with a soft radiance. Her face was smiling as if through a mist. "Are you still unwell?" I asked her. "No, it's all over now," she answered, and plucked a small red rose. "I am a little tired, but that will pass." "And you will be the same as you were before?" I asked. Zenaida lifted the rose to her face, and it seemed to me as if her cheeks caught the reflection of its bright petals. "Why, am I changed then?" she asked. "Yes, you are," I answered in a low voice. "I have been cold to you, I know," began Zenaida, "but you should not have taken any notice of it. I couldn't help it, but then, why talk about it? You don't want me to love you, that's what it is," I burst out gloomily against my will. "No, love me, yes, but not as before." "Why? What am I to do?" "Let us be friends, that's what." Zenaida gave me the rose to smell. "Listen, I am, after all, much older than you. I really might be your aunt. Oh, well, perhaps not aunt, but elder sister. And you?" "I am a child to you," I interrupted. "Well, yes, a child, but a sweet, good, clever child whom I love very much. I'll tell you what, as from today you are appointed to be my page, and always remember that pages must never leave their mistress's side. And here was a token of your new dignity," she added, putting the rose in the buttonhole of my jacket, "a sign of your gracious favor." "I have received other favors from you before," I murmured. "Ah," said Zenaida, and gave me a sidelong look. "What a memory he has. Oh, well, I am just as ready now," and bent down towards me and placed on my forehead a pure, calm kiss. I did not look at her. She turned away, and saying, "Follow me, my page," went towards the lodge. I walked behind her and could not understand it. Can this gentle, sensible girl, I kept thinking, be the Zenaida whom I used to know? Her very walk seemed gentler, her whole figure more stately and more graceful. Great heavens, with what fresh force my love flamed up within me. I mean, he's not that younger. Like, she's 21, he's 16. 30, 35, 35, 30. She's still young herself.